Hi guys, Black is here, and some weeks ago I was watching one of the Car Wizard videos, and he was talking about, I think it was a Chevrolet Suburban, I think it was, older Chevrolet Suburban, and he was talking about how the transmission was he said it was a decent transmission, he said, but what kills the transmission is when people tow in overdrive. It was either 4L60E or it was a 700R4. I can't. They both the same except the 4L60E is electronically controlled. Right? It's not 100% electronically controlled, but it has a lot more electronics than the 700R4. But I heard the same thing when I grew up. The same thing when I remember when the 700R4 came out, right? I remember a friend of my father had a pickup truck, and we was riding around in the city, and I remember it was so weird because it had that extra gear, and when it shifted into overdrive back then, it would lock up the torque converter at like 35, 40 miles per hour, and it would kind of bog the engine down. And my father had said, when we got out of the truck, my father said that he couldn't stand that transmission. It was doing a bunch of unnecessary shifting. And it was, because he wasn't going that fast. And he had it in the overdrive, and it was just doing a lot of shifting, right? And sometime later I read that in the city, you were supposed to drive it in drive. And you're supposed to put it in the overdrive once you got on the highway. Now, because of that, when the 4L60E came out, people thought it was the same way. You're not supposed to use overdrive in the city. You're supposed to wait until you get on the highway, but that's not true. With the 4L60E, you could drive it in the city because the torque converter didn't just lock up when it go to overdrive. It would lock up when there wasn't much weight on it. All right. But anyway, a lot of people still believe that old saying with the 700R4, the Car Wizard is one of those people. And he gave off some bad information. And the thing is, the 700R4, it didn't go bad because people drove in the city in overdrive. That's not the reason why it went bad. It didn't go bad because people was towing. It went bad because people did not drop the pan and change transmission fluid. Now, anybody watching my channel is probably saying, oh, Black, you always say drop the pan, change transmission fluid. And that's because it's important. Just like people change the oil, they change the filter in their car. You should do the same thing with transmission. Not as often, but you should do it. You know, my Trailblazer is a 2004. It's got the 4L60E in there, right? I had this transmission rebuilt 2-3 years ago. It didn't go bad because I was towing. I've always had a problem with that transmission. When I first got the damn Trailblazer, I said I was gonna make a video talking about that, but that's a different story. Let me just get to the rebuild. I got a rebuild again 2-3 years ago, right? How many miles on? I think I checked the other day. It was, I don't know, 17,000 miles or something like that on it. And I called the guy who rebuilt my transmission. I called him and asked him, when should I bring it back to get the transmission fluid and filter change? I just want to see what he had to say. And he told me that I shouldn't have to get a fluid and filter change for 5 years. And I'm like, 5 years? The hell is he talking about? Well, I'm not going to listen to him, all right? I was thinking the other day, I think I'm going to change it at 20,000. Drop the pan, change the fluid and filter myself. And when people hear that, drop the pan, change the fluid and filter, they think the fluid, oh, well, I need to get all the fluid out the transmission. No, you don't need to do all that. You just need to drop the pan, change the filter, and put whatever fluid back in. The fluid that's in the torque converter is fine. It's fine. It's been through the filter. The fluid in the torque converter went through the filter before it got to the torque converter. So it's been filtered. When you change the fluid and filter, you're removing the dirt that's in that filter that came from that fluid. So it's gone. But anyway, again, people say you're not supposed to tow an overdrive. You'll tear the transmission up. That does not tear a transmission up. Even the 700 R4 towing in overdrive does not tear it up. I will explain why. Give me a second. When the transmission, say you're driving down the road, you pulling a trailer, you're in overdrive, right? When you shift into overdrive, the transmission, people say that when it shifts back and forth, it tears the transmission. Again, that does not tear the transmission up because it only shifts to overdrive when there's not much weight on the engine. So even though you're towing the trailer and you think, well, there's a lot of weight on that trailer, it still does not shift into overdrive until there's not much weight on the transmission or the engine or whatever. Then when you step down hard and it downshift out of overdrive, all it does, first of all, the 700 R4, the 4L60E, remember I said they were the same transmission, just the 60 is electronic control. When it shifts into overdrive, all it does is clamp the second gear band down. The same band that for second gear, it clamps it down and it turns into overdrive. Okay. When it downshift, all it does is release the band. That's all it does. It released the band. So how do I know this? I didn't read this. I've actually taken the transmission. Hell, I have a video. I might have erased it recently, but I have a video where I show how a 4L60E shift. It shifts the same way a 700 R4 does. The same way. When it shifts overdrive, it locks down the second gear band and it calls the planetary whatever to overdrive, right? And like I said, when it downshift, all it does is unlock that band and then the planetary stops overdriving and it becomes locked. And in other words, it's not, when it shifts from overdrive to drive, it's not slipping the clutch. It's letting go of band, but it's not slipping the clutch. When it shifts to overdrive, it does clamp down on the band, but again, it only does that when there's not much weight on the engine. So in other words, you're not burning up the band by shifting back and forth. If somebody say, well, I lost overdrive band and it didn't work no more. If the overdrive band didn't work no more, you would have lost second gear too. And I've heard somebody tell that lie, that they lost the second gear, the overdrive band, and overdrive didn't work no more. If you lost the overdrive band, you lost second gear also, because again, they work together. That's why it's called the 2/4 band. It's the second gear band and it's also the overdrive band. The same band. My Tahoe, before the Trailblazer, I had a 96 Tahoe that had a 4L60E, and I put 285,000 miles on that transmission before I decided to rebuild it. And here's the kicker. It was still working. I could have drove that sucker to California and back. You say, well, how could you have done that if it needed rebuilding? It only slipped going to second and third gear at like 75% throttle or more. In other words, when you put your foot 3/4 way down on the throttle, and when it shifts to second gear, when it shifts to third gear, it would slip a little bit. And the funny part was when I took the transmission apart and rebuilt it, I was assuming that the second gear band was burnt up. And I was assuming the 3/4 clutches were burnt up. Now, the band was fine. The 3/4 clutches did have a lot of slack in them, but the slip wasn't coming from neither one of those parts. The slip was coming from the forward clutch. So why was the forward clutch slipping? Because it has what's called a forward clutch housing. It's made out of aluminum. It cracked some kind of way. So the forward clutches, remember I said that forward clutches are on through all 4 gears. Well, when the transmission shifted to second gear, you would think the band was slipping. It wasn't a band, it was the forward clutch, because like I said, the housing was cracked. When it shifted to third gear, I thought third gear was slipping. It wasn't third gear. It was the forward clutch housing. It was losing pressure. So anyway, I replaced the 96 used an aluminum forward clutch housing. I don't know what year, 97, 98, one damn years they went to a steel. And the funny part was I took the parts out of a used transmission. I had a used 4L60E that I used to learn how to rebuild the transmission. I took a couple used parts out of that transmission and put it in my transmission, and guess what? The slip went away. Whenever someone starts talking about a 4L60E, I don't know everything, but I know a lot about them. And they will last a lot longer if you drop the pan and change the filter. Dre, y'all have a good day.